All right, let's pick up where we left off just a few moments ago. A federal judge in Pennsylvania has ruled that Governor Tom Wolf's lockdown orders are unconstitutional. The judge ruled that it violates both the First and the 14th Amendments. A lawsuit was filed after Wolf ordered that the state health secretary shut down all these businesses, and Judge William Stickman struck down Wolf's limits on indoor and outdoor gatherings of between 25 and 250 people. Let's bring in the executive director for USA Strong and a new Turning Point USA contributor, our friend Erin Elmore. Great to see you, Erin.
You as well.
All right, so you're a Philadelphia native. I saw you were reacting very positively to this news here. So what comes next?
Well, the good news is they are binding almost immediately. So those restrictions are no longer in place. You can have indoor and outdoor gatherings of any size now. And this trickles down as well. In Philadelphia, we have a mayor who is basically borderline fascist, and all of his restrictions will also not be in place. So these are binding immediately, and hopefully other states will follow this precedent and do the same thing. I think it's a very good sign for people that like freedom and conservative thought.
Yeah, Larry Krasner, he's the mayor, right, of Philadelphia? And
Larry Krasner is our George Soros appointed district attorney.
Oh, he's the district attorney. I'm sorry. The mayor is the mayor of Philadelphia.
Jim Kenney.
Yes, Kenney. So, they have been in cahoots on this whole thing for a long time. Like many of the Democratic mayors we've seen in other places, Philadelphia, like many cities, suffered from some of this violent riots and looting after the George Floyd death. But how are the businesses responding in your hometown?
I've lived here for 20 years and I have that Citizen app. And let me tell you, that thing is ringing and dinging like crazy. Philadelphia is a place I called home, a place that I loved. It's a place that I no longer feel safe to walk down the street. And I am not being histrionic in any way, shape, or form. The liberal Democrats, under the agenda of George Soros of death and destruction, are ruining this city. Businesses have permanently closed. Restaurants just were allowed to open inside at 25% capacity. Several businesses aren't reopening, whether they're shops owned by women business owners that I know, none of them are really reopening. Everything is still boarded up. There are homeless people all over the street that desperately could use homeless shelters. And there's no services being offered to these people, whether it's drug treatment, mental health treatment. Everyone is left to be fend for themselves. And the mayor and the district attorney simply just pat themselves on the back and pretend to be doing a good job when they're not. Moreover, our mayor told us we couldn't dine inside until last week. He was caught in Maryland eating inside. Practicing what he preaches? I don't think so. And his excuse was, it was my friend's restaurant. Well, let me tell you, Mr. Mayor, I have friends with restaurants, and they're struggling.
Right. Yeah, it was also quite a cell phone, too, when he had to mention the fact that the particular place in Maryland where he was had a much better, much lower COVID infection rate than where he is in charge of Philadelphia. Let's turn our attention now to talk about the U.S. Senate and some of these crucial Senate races for Republicans, including Maine Senator Susan Collins. Now, she is now trailing her opponent by 12 points there, the Democrat. Susan Collins is probably the most moderate senator in the entire chamber, but that's not helping her out too much here, is it?
So this is becoming one of the hottest and most expensive Senate races in the country. The poll numbers are a little surprising because last time she ran, she got nearly 70% of the vote. However, her ties to Trump and confirming Brett Kavanaugh could be hurting her in her home state. She hasn't changed for half the makeup of the state has. Having said that, just 7 days ago, AARP polling showed a completely different scenario. They showed that Democrat Sarah Gideon only led Collins 44-43, and that was well within the poll's 3.3% margin of error. So the polling is truly all over the place here, and I think this Senate race is really, it's going to be a tough one. It could be a closer one. I don't think the polling is all that adequate, but all the Democrats need is 4 seats. So everyone is watching these races very closely. And the other thing that the AARP showed is in other key states like Arizona, the polling was pretty close, within the margin of error, or not too far apart. So I think it's going to require a little more polling, and we're going to have to keep a close eye on this between now and November.
No, it's a great point, too, because you look at these polls, and you talked about three battleground states, more or less. Maine, pretty, right down the middle. Arizona as well. And Florida. What we're seeing is a differential there. They're not having the same type of impact. There's no moderate voters anymore. There's no undecided voters. Everybody's usually made up their minds. When you have somebody like Susan Collins, who is a moderate, I don't think that's benefiting her in this election cycle. cycle. You know, her challenger, Sarah Gideon, is targeting her for her support of President Trump's tax plan, also the Kavanaugh vote, which you mentioned. But again, I think that was a galvanizing moment for a lot of people when Susan Collins didn't really stand up for Brett Kavanaugh the way a lot of Republicans did. You know, she looked a little wishy-washy.
I think you're perhaps right. And as indicated, she's not the one who has really changed. I do think it's the makeup of the state. But I do believe with this lack of law and order and defunding the police, there might be a turnaround. The more riots that we see, the more suburban voters feel terrified and afraid, things could really shift in her favor.
Yeah, I mean, there's only, left close to 50 days left until the election is over. But I don't talk to any undecided voters anymore. Everybody is either in one camp or the other. There's nobody still waiting to make up their mind, Erin. Lastly, before we leave here, 1 minute left real quick. You may have heard this too. The New York City's mayor and his entire office is being furloughed this week. The city is attempting to close the budget gap. But I think there's a lot of people that would say that 1 week is simply not enough, and maybe Bill de Blasio should just furlough himself for the rest of his term.
For the harm that he's caused to his city, he should not receive 1 penny from taxpayers. Moreover, his wife, I'm going to read you a little statistic here. Charlene McRae is assisted by 14 city workers, costing taxpayers $2 million a year. These people are shameful bureaucrats saying, do as I say and not as I do. They have their hand out to the taxpayer when they are shutting this city down. He just announced today that schools will not reopen. Yeah. What are they doing to parents? What are they doing to restaurant owners? What are they doing to New York City businesses? He should not be allowed to take $1 more from the taxpayers.
If he had any shame whatsoever, he would not take $1 more. The mayor says the outbreak cost the city close to $9 billion. But as you mentioned, he decided to shut it down. And we saw the governor get involved, too, and saying it's time to open those restaurants back up in New York as well. Great to see you, Erin. We'll check in with you in the next hour. I don't normally do this, but we're going to talk about fashion and Kamala Harris's shoes. Oh, I'm excited, very much so. All right, coming up, a French VP hopeful Kamala Harris makes a fashion statement with her footwear during her visit to the California wildfires, and the press corps loved it. Take a look. Harris rocking her Timberland boots as she stepped off her private plane and walked down the red carpet. Yahoo News ran with this headline: Kamala Harris may have made Timberland boots cool again. She didn't. But when our first lady, Melania Trump, wore her Timberland boots to visit the troops back in 2018, she was mocked. Yahoo News actually ran the same story, except when it was Melania, they said, not so cool. 2 women, same boots, but only one of those people wearing boots is actually helping sex offenders get bailed out of jail. That's right. Back in July, during the George Floyd riots, Harris promoted the Minnesota Freedom Fund. She blasted out a tweet to her followers telling them to donate to the group. That group then used those funds to bail out a suspect accused of sexually assaulting an 8-year-old girl. This according to the Daily Caller. Reuters also reports that at least 13 staffers on Joe Biden's presidential team have also contributed money to that same fund. And joining us now to talk more about this is a senior policy analyst at the Independent Women's Forum, Patrice Leon-Wuka. She's also a Newsmax columnist. And back again with us, Executive Director for USA Strong, Erin Elmore. Ladies, thanks for sticking around.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so shoes not my forte, especially women's shoes here. But just real quickly, first to you, Erin, who wore it best, Melania or Kamala?
Well, I just think there's a major hypocrisy here. When it's Republicans, they're doing something wrong. And if it's a Democrat, she can do no wrong. You know, in the situation of Kamala, she was just a lady of the people getting off her private jet in Timberland. How cute is that? But I will tell you this. I did a little exercise, and I Googled. In Google, which we know is a biased search engine against conservatives, if you Google Melania Trump best dress, it returns over 31 million results. If you do the same with Michelle Obama, it's only results. So I think that would lead us to believe the people of America are more in favor of Republican fashion.
Oh, well, that's an interesting point. You know, what do you think about this, Patrice? Are you Melania's Tims are better than Kamala Harris's Tims? I don't know.
I mean, honestly, I think Tims are great if they're being used in the right situation.
Sticks with, the same kind of ties. But gosh, if a woman, wears a certain kind of shoes or she wears a certain kind of pantsuit, this is really what the media loves to cover. Why is it so much different, Erin?
I think that's one of those things. There is a difference between the genders, although some people don't believe that there is. And there are men and there are women. And women tend to really like fashion and like to comment on fashion. And unfortunately, men's outfits just aren't as interesting. A suit and a tie isn't always as exciting as a beautiful cocktail dress and heels. In both situations here, yes, they were wearing Timberlands. And no, there's never a bad occasion to wear Timberlands. But in this situation, it's a little unfair that Yahoo News and other media outlets skewered Melania, yet sort of said Kamala was the heir apparent. So I think that there are bigger issues here. The bigger issue is policy. For Kamala, and she's really got an uphill battle. They're calling her the most liberal person in Washington right now, so I think she has to contend with her record as opposed to her footwear.
Yeah, well, the one time President Obama wore that tan suit, that did create a controversy, but that was interesting, but I don't know why. 5-year-old, but again, he says it's the Democrats' fault here. Chris Rock tried to warn us, didn't he, Erin?
Chris Rock's just trying to sell movies, and the only one that cares about Hollywood anymore are those coastal elites, the limousine liberals, and the people out in California. To be honest, I think he's literally just trying to pander to the people that are going to watch his movies and buy his Netflix specials and things of that nature. But listen, this is what the Democrats have been doing since President Trump was elected. There was the Russia collusion, and then it was impeachment. Those things went absolutely nowhere. Their Trump derangement syndrome is so severe that they were trying anything to get him out of office and redo the results of the 2016 election. And here we have it. He is going to likely be reelected again. Their narrative of lack of law and order, defund the police, isn't playing well with voters. Keeping children home from school isn't playing well with voters. Yet all they can do is get rid of our president, get stimulus bills. And what are they really offering to the American people? Absolutely nothing. And I think on November 3rd and on November 4th, President Trump will be back in office, and the Democrats are really going to have that hard look in the mirror. They're going to really have to say to themselves, where did we go wrong? All they do is point fingers and call other people racist, and they offer no solutions. They say they're the party of inclusion and women and diversity.
Well, they're going to have to offer up some real solutions here. Well, maybe we'll hear some at Joe Biden's town hall tonight. Last 30 seconds to Patrice on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Chris Rock represents a lot of the buyer's remorse that a lot of these liberals